Good morning. Welcome to the midweek edition of Inside Nigeria. Of course, we have a newspaper review on this segment of the show. And my name is Winifred Ugbebo. Today is September 24, 2025. Without wasting much time, we head up to the paper, Nigeria's most influential, to see what it's offering in its menu this Wednesday. Employers Economists hail central bank for slashing interest rates to 27%. Employers Economists hail central bank for slashing interest rate to 27%. Cut is first since 2020. Complementary fiscal reforms urged. Of course, like I just started with leadership. Some of the papers we have on our lineup has this cover story, leadership's cover story, as their also main cover story. Also, papers like Nigerian Tribune, the Nation newspaper have this sharing news on their cover. Employers Economists hail central bank for slashing interest rates to 27%. Cut is forced since 2020. Complementary fiscal reforms urged. That story continues on page 4 of leadership. Perhaps we'll have to see some excerpts from that cover story. After 5 years, the Central Bank of Nigeria has reduced its key interest rate, signaling a cautious shift in its monetary stance as inflation shows steady improvement. At the end of its two-day Monetary Policy Committee (MPC) session in Abuja on Tuesday, the CBN lowered the MPRO by 50 basis points to 27%. This adjustment marks the outset of a gradual easing phase designed to boost economic growth while preserving macroeconomic stability. The benchmark rate was last reduced in September 2020 from 12.5% to 11.5%. The recent cut aims to stimulate economic growth and slowing inflationary pressure and improve macroeconomic stability. Excerpts from the leading story on today's leadership newspaper. Employers Economists hail central bank for slashing interest rate to 27%. Of course, for economists, we know what this impact has on the economy, and we'll have a leadership analyst, Chase Amon, to shed more light on it, to join the conversation. However, we'll continue with the review of leadership newspaper, but we'll also have him join us. We move to the cover and continue from where we stop. Other stories gracing the cover of leadership this Wednesday. 14 banks have cleared recapitalization hurdle coming from the CBN governor, Cardoso. And that story is on the business boss of leadership. With about 6 months to the deadline for banks in Nigeria to meet the new capital requirement, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, Olayemi Cardoso, has confirmed that about 14 banks have scaled the hurdle, up from the 8 that met the goal as of July. Speaking at the end of the 302nd Monetary Policy Committee (MPC) meeting, Cardoso affirmed that the Nigerian financial sector has continued to be resilient, with significant progress in the recapitalization process. The CBN governor said on the financial sector, the MPC noted the continued resilience of the banking system, with most of the financial soundness indicators remaining within projected benchmarks. That is a kudos to the CBN-led Cardoso. 14 banks have cleared recapitalization hurdle. That is just 6 months to the deadline for banks to recapitalize, and 14 banks have already met the recapitalization. We move ahead to other stories. National Assembly resumption delayed over budget concerns, independence celebrations. That story is on the page 4 of leadership. Oil workers reject government's plan to sell JV oil assets. Tinubu, Africa must end raw material exports, build factories. Of course, this is coming on the heels of the export ban on Russia recently. And Tinubu is saying Africa must end raw material exports, build factories. Federal Varsity Azari expects 21 students rusticates 4. Federal Varsity Azari expects 21 students rusticates 4. Work harder on economic policies, insecurity, Afenifere tells president. Why Igbo elders raise the alarm over Nnamdi Kanu's health. That story is on page 7 of leadership. Of course, we have the picture of the first family, FCT family, the Minister of FCT, Nyesom Wike, his wife, and the son who was just recently called to the bar, Jordan, and his daughter Jasmine at Jordan's call to bar ceremony in Abuja on Tuesday. Congratulations to the FCT Force family. We move to the stories about the mindset of leadership. Natasha returns to Senate, says she owes no one apology. The story continues on page 17 of Leadership. That is also a story that is gracing the cover of other papers today. This Wednesday. Natasha returns to Senate, says she owes no one apology. Because that story trended massively yesterday on the internet and even now. Lastly, on the cover of Leadership, 3 soldiers back life imprisonment. One gets 15 years for aiding terrorists. And that takes us to page 3 of Leadership, where we have our stand. Today's stand is on peace deals with bandits. There's a question mark on today's stand in Leadership. Peace deals with bandits. Some of the videos trending online arising from the current attempts to negotiate with bandits by some local government areas of Katsina State have justified the position of most Nigerians, including this newspaper, who have kicked against negotiation with the bandits. As at the last count, 11 local government areas comprising Jibia, Basari, Safana, Damusa, Kofi, Busawa, Matazu, Faskari, Kankara, Danjume, and Sabuwa have signed what the authorities called a peace deal with bandits. These deals were monitored by government officials, traditional rulers, and even security operatives. The latest council area to enter such a clearly futile entente could deal with these criminals and rogue elements is the Sabuwa local government area. However, the sort of weapons displayed by these bandits and the fact that they were not taken away from them show how fragile the so-called negotiation and peace deals are. We'll move towards the conclusion, or rather the stand of the paper in our stand today. It says, assuming without considering that negotiations with bandits is the solution to the current challenges and will ultimately guarantee lasting peace, what measures are being taken to placate the victims of their crimes? Justice demands that victims of crimes have restitution, and until that is done, the nation cannot be on its way to enduring peace. Even worse, in our opinion, is the fact that what is going on indicates a duplicity on the part of the security apparatus of state running with the hare while at the same time hunting with the hound. Similarly, it goes to prove right the speculation that insecurity has become a lucrative franchise when considered that its budget is hardly available for auditing. Today's stand in Leadership newspaper, peace deals with bandits, is a question the stand is posing today. Peace deals with bandits. With our stand, we move to the back page of the paper where we have Wednesday column with Olufunke Baruwa. Today she's writing on Queen Vashti, Senator Natasha, and the prize reward in bracket of defiance. Queen Vashti, Senator Natasha, and the prize reward in bracket of defiance. Like Queen Vashti, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan refused to bow, refused to be diminished, and pay the price for saying no. Now she reaps the reward of her defiance, not just for herself, but for all Nigerian women. Quote from today's Wednesday column with Olufunke Baruwa on Queen Vashti, Senator Natasha, and the prize reward of defiance. Let's go to Ghana Must Go before we leave the back page. From an analyst, he says, I don't see Fubara joining APC. And of course, Ghana Must Go told him that is because you need glasses. Funny, you might say. It's on that note we conclude review of Leadership newspaper this Wednesday, this midweek edition of the show. Don't forget to log in to the website of Leadership for continuation of those headline stories. We head on to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is Nigerian Tribune. Nigerian Tribune, like Leadership, has similar story as its main cover. It says business leaders express hope as CBN calls interest rate to 27%. Perhaps we'll have our leadership analysts join us in the conversation. Cheers, Hamon. Good morning. Business leaders express hope as CBN calls interest rate to 27%. Leading story on today's Nigerian Tribune is a step towards building more resilient, growth-oriented economy, say PPE. NECA DG urges strategic easing to boost growth. That story continues on page 5 of Nigerian Tribune. Business leaders express hope as CBN calls interest rate to 27%. Ekiti 2026, I have confidence in our party, Oyebaji. Alleged land grabbing. Ogun government files charges against 2 traditional rulers, others. First bank to launch financial services for blind, physically challenged customers. And today's head story: uncontrolled high blood pressure puts over 1 billion people at risk, WHO. Incidentally, today is World Hypertension Day, as commemorated by the World Health Organization and United Nations. It's a day set aside to commemorate, to throw more awareness on the silent killer, hypertension. And today's head story says uncontrolled high blood pressure puts over 1 billion people at risk, coming from WHO. 44th Olubadan, Tinubu, Atiku, Sultan, Emirs of Kano, Ilorin expected at Ladoja's coronation. New Olubadan begins traditional rites. Ibadan in festive mood as billboards, banners flood streets. We've never witnessed such. Residents Coronation Committee announces rules to be closed on Friday. We move to the mastheads. Above that, Nupeng, Pegas and Kick against federal government's plan to sell JV oil assets. Senate unseats Natasha's office as she resumes amid tight security. I want to apologize, she vows. Court adjourns Senator's preliminary objection to October 27. And that also concludes review of front headline stories on Nigerian Tribune this Wednesday. For more, log into www.nigeriantribune.online. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard is still talking business. It says 14 banks fully meet new capital requirements. That is also another sub-headline story, a kicker on the cover of Nigerian Tribune, and the business story on the cover of Leadership. 14 banks fully meet new capital requirements. CBN reduces interest rate to 27%. External reserves hit $43 billion. NECA demands reforms to ease cost of living crisis. CBN's easing of credit conditions, a welcome timely intervention, coming from CPPE. Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan storms Senate office, resumes duties. Defamation federal government alleges plot to scuttle Natasha's trial. Tinubu seeks reform of global financial architecture. Diri Kuka lists ethnicity orders as impediments to federalism. First Bank said to launch financial services for blind, fiscally challenged customers. And atop the mounted, 3 soldiers jailed for selling arms to terrorists. We also have the picture of Wike's son called to bar yesterday in Abuja. And we have second picture, Amechi's son weds. Congratulations to the both former governors of Rivers State. It's on that note we conclude review of Vanguard newspaper this Wednesday. For more, log in to the website of Vanguard. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is Daily Sun. Daily Sun is taking Senator Natasha's story as the main cover headline. It says Senator Natasha resumes, vows not to apologize. Court to hear her preliminary objection in defamation suit. NAS reschedules plenary resumption to October 7. Above that leading story, CBN calls interest rate to 27%, eyes $1 billion monthly inflows as 14 banks fully recapitalized. Lastly, on the cover of Daily Sun, Pegasan rejects federal government's planned sale of JV oil assets, PIA amendment. And that concludes that review of Daily Sun. We move to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is the Punch. Punching story today says 8.41 trillion naira oil theft drains economy, fuels investors' doubts. Experts spot lack of arrest prosecution in 4 years, I0 oil theft. Regulator hails lowest losses in 16 years amid reservations by analysts. Strike, Sanu Nasu extend ultimatum. Arms racketeering, 3 soldiers court-martialed, jailed for life. Olubadan, Oyo restricts traffic for Ladoja's coronation. Lagos cop woman killed as container crushes tricycle. Pengassan Nupeng rejects plan to sell assets. Beside the masthead of the Punch, 20 billion naira library fundraiser not for 2027, Remi Tinubu. And above the masthead of the Punch, Natasha resumes at Senate, calls Akpabio dictator. 411% revenue rise won't stop federal government borrowing coming from Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS. CBN lowers interest rates, OPS demands credit relief, that is organized private sector demands credit relief. That concludes review of front headline stories on The Punch this Wednesday. For more, log into the website of The Punch newspaper, www.punchng.com. We move ahead to the last paper we have on our lineup this Wednesday, and that is The Guardian. The Guardian is on UN at 80. Of course, there's ongoing United Nations General Assembly in New York, United States of America. Yesterday, President Donald Trump addressed the gathering, and of course, that is where the Guardian story, main headline story, is coming from. It says wider cracks in world order amid warnings on 8 courts union's future. UN at 80, wider cracks in world order amid warnings on 8 courts union's future. High blood pressure puts 4 billion people at risk, WHO warns. High blood pressure puts 1.4 billion, why am I calling Naira? Billion people at risk, WHO warns. Same leading story on Nigerian Tribune. And like I mentioned earlier, today is a World Hypertension Day, which draws attention and awareness to the silent killer, hypertension. Pengassan Nupeng warned federal government against selling JV stakes. Concerns in Lagos APC as 4 elected female officials die in 2 months. Relief for businesses as CBN eases 4-year tightening, cuts interest rate to 27%. Tinubu raises 20.4 billion naira for National Library at birthday anniversary. Benue IDPs vow to occupy FCT until normalcy returns. And we move to the masthead of The Guardian. Tinubu's handling of INEC transition will define Nigeria's democracies, says Yaga. Defamation case adjourned as Senate Natasha reach uncommon truths. FROS clarifies borrowing plan, confirms new tax regime from January. And that also concludes the review of front headline stories on The Guardian this Wednesday. For more, log into www.guardian.ng. Well, viewers, all too soon, we've come to the end of today's Inside Nigeria. We've been experiencing some technical glitches. If not, we're supposed to have leadership analyst Chase Hammond join us in the conversation on today's leading story in Leadership newspaper. However, tomorrow is another day for another fresh edition of the program. My name is Winifred Webo. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.